Well, alrighty, gang. Welcome back to the Gutowski Files, starring Stephen Gutowski. He is the owner, founder, and editor-chief over at TheReload.com. The Reload.
Today's sponsor is Bond, a personal security platform and a very useful tool between everything is fine and calling 911. It's the I'm uncomfortable button that gives you and your loved ones instant on security agents so you're never alone. Bond agents engage and deter perps who want no witnesses. They have a 100% track record deterring crimes of opportunity because it's like installing a can of OC spray on your phone. It's for when you can't carry tools and for your loved ones who won't. Check out Bond's special ASP discount at the link below.
.com. Consider getting a membership over there. Stephen does rely on his membership dues to fund his important work. Stephen, how are you, sir?
Doing good. You know, you really got the radio voice cadence thing going down.
I'm doing my best.
Really growing into this job here.
What I try to avoid is doing the news reader or like the reporter voice, which is so weird. They all have that same like we're joined today by Stephen Gutowski. It's like, well, okay, just say it. Say the words. You don't have to be all weird. So I noticed your T-shirt, sir, Veteran Stadium, and you put that on this morning before you knew it was an anniversary. Tell the nice people.
I mean, I knew it was coming up, but this is the 20th anniversary of when they imploded the Vet, when they blew it all up. But it was a good stadium. I mean, I have a lot of fond memories in that stadium. I went to the last Army-Navy game that they did there with my dad. Although there was probably a good reason it was the last one. That was when the cadets fell on the field because the railing collapsed.
Oh, that's
kind of
right.
like when they tried to kill Jalen Hurts at FedEx Field.
Yep.
Broken.
Yeah, and FedEx took over as the crappiest stadium in the NFL once the Vet was demolished. It was relatively new at the time. Nobody had sewer pipes breaking poop on their head from during a game or whatever. FedEx needs.
It's crazy how new that FedEx Field is for how bad it is. It's from like terrible. The 90s, right?
It's consistently ranked the worst stadium in the NFL, and it has been for like the last 10 years at least. It's bad. I went there a couple of years ago and watched a game. We got to be careful. We're venturing into sports talk here. I don't want people to turn off.
Well, we have depressing news today, so
that's true. I wanted to
start off light.
Keep it a little bit light, such as far as that's possible. So we are talking today about a Supreme Court case. So I'd kind of like you to walk the good listeners and viewers through the pretext, what the case was originally about and who was involved and why this matters. It does seem to me kind of like an almost obvious ruling. I think most people think it's a pretty obvious ruling and it's probably the right decision. Not everyone agrees with that. So kind of walk us through from the beginning. This is a case out of Texas, as I understand it, right?
Yes, this was a case against a man named Zachary Rahimi, who had a domestic violence restraining order taken out against him by the mother of his child over an incident where he had assaulted her, and then he had actually was accused of shooting at a witness who saw him assault her and then threatened to kill her. And this was all part of the restraining order hearing. There was a hearing where he had an option to, give statements with a lawyer at the hearing. He chose not to, but the judge determined he was a threat based on these real life allegations against him. And he challenged the convict. So, he had this restraining order, right? And then he kind of went on, or he's at least accused of going on a crime spree, basically, where he was involved in a number of incidents, including a drug deal where he shot up somebody's house who was involved in a drug deal, road rage incident where he chased down a truck and shot at it on the highway, and then also a bizarre fast food incident where his friend's card was declined at a Whataburger, and so he shot at the Whataburger. This guy had really liked to resort to shooting at things when he was mad, I guess. Bad aim, I suppose, because I don't think he's accused of actually hitting anyone.
If he had been in and out, things would have been different, by the way. He wouldn't have been so upset. He would have just been like, I'm going to go get some cash out of the ATM and pay for these doubles and, call it a day.
Yeah, there you go. But so he that's why they searched his house, all these other incidents that he's charged with. And they found a gun and a restraining order in where he was living. So not the brightest guy, in addition to being not a good guy, not a good dude, right? Which I think is more common, as perhaps you can speak to this with your experience, more common than maybe TV lets on.
Yeah.
About how criminals are really like.
My old partner Mike would say we don't catch the smart ones. I don't know if he coined that or not, but which means we catch a lot of bad guys because most people involved in a life of criminality are, for whatever reason, just not too terribly bright, and they do things to get themselves caught that would seem obvious to other people. I remember watching a something on, crikey, what was it, Netflix or something. Anyway, they're talking about mobsters, Giuliani breaking up the five families back in the day in New York City, and the FBI agent or detective, whoever it was like, they glorify these people in movies and on TV as being these arch super smart. They're a bunch of dummies. They're just a bunch of violent dummies who are willing to do violent dummy stuff. So yeah,
Yeah,
I can speak to that.
Rahimi definitely fits that bill, it seems, from at least what's in the court record and what he's accused of. But so he was convicted for having this gun while being subject to that restraining order, because under federal law, you can't possess firearms when you're subject to a domestic violence restraining order. And so he challenged that conviction under the Second Amendment. He actually did that before Bruin came down. It was denied. Then Bruin came down, the landmark case in 2022 we've talked about a lot in the past here on the show. But it set up this new test for Second Amendment cases based on history and tradition, to determine whether or not a modern gun law is constitutional. You have to find historical analogs that date to around the time the Second Amendment was ratified, back during the founding, right? And so he challenged under that standard again once Bruin was handed down, and he had more success, and he actually got a favorable ruling at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, where they sided with him and said there isn't a historical analog for this kind of domestic violence restraining order from the founding era, and so the law is unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. And then that got the Department of Justice appealed that to the Supreme Court. Frankly, some very good tactical litigation, because this is kind of if you don't like the Bruin ruling, this is the exact kind of follow-up case you would want to see, because it's not a very favorable defendant involved here, given what we just described about his background and the accusations against him. And also this was a facial challenge. So a facial challenge is when you challenge a law and you say there's no possible constitutional application for this law. It's unconstitutional on its face. All you have to do to defeat that kind of challenge is show a single application where it would be constitutional, right? There's other challenges that are easier to win and less broad, called as-applied challenges, which means as applied to the defendant, how the law was actually applied to this individual person, it's unconstitutional, instead of saying the whole law itself is unconstitutional, right? So it's a harder bar to pass if you're the plaintiff, if you're challenging the law. And also, this is a very unsympathetic defendant. As they noted multiple times in oral arguments, I believe Chief Justice John Roberts said at one point they were talking about this standard of dangerousness for disarming people, that they'd have to meet some sort of, there'd be evidence that they were dangerous. And he said, if anyone's dangerous, it's Rahimi.
Right.
And so perhaps unsurprisingly, given how oral arguments went, the court sided with the Department of Justice and ruled against Rahimi, and found that now it was a fairly specific ruling, or fairly specific holding in this case. It held that Rahimi, I'll give you the quote right here. When a restraining order contains a finding that an individual poses a credible threat to the physical safety of an intimate partner, that individual may, consistent with the Second Amendment, be barred from possessing firearms while the order is in effect. So some key things there. That's being an individual finding of dangerousness, and the possession ban can only apply temporarily while the order is in effect.